And welcome to the Kinder Institute Forum. I'm Bill Fulton, the director of the Kinder Institute, and we're thrilled to have you with us today for our lecture from Antoine Bryant. The Kinder Institute Forum, as you know, the series brings thought leaders from around the world to Houston to share ideas about today's most pressing urban issues, and in particular, and relevant to today's talk, the relationship between Houston as an urban place and other urban places in the U.S. Today's presentation is from a longtime Houston resident, now director of planning in Detroit, Antoine Bryant. I'll get to that in a minute. We ask that you tweet using the hashtag KIForum, and follow us on Twitter at RiceKinderInst, at RiceKinderInst. But that hashtag KIForum is what you use to live tweet out from today. If you have any questions after the presentation, when Antoine is done, I'll mediate a Q&A. What we ask that you do is put the Q&A down in the Q&A box, not in the chat box. Sometimes people put questions in the chat box. Please put them in the Q&A box, and I will go through the questions and ask them, and Antoine will answer them. I'll try to answer them in the order of popularity. As you know, if you've participated in Zoom before, you can like other people's questions, and that will increase the likelihood of us getting to them. The Kinder Institute Forum series is made possible thanks to our friends at PNC Bank, the title sponsor of this lecture series. PNC was unavailable to speak today, but we thank them for their support. PNC entered the market in Houston not long ago, and they've been a great partner for the Kinder Institute, as they have been for so many other people here in Houston. I also want to say generous support for this, for the Kinder Institute's work comes from a multi-year grant from Houston Endowment. In addition, the Institute relies on philanthropic investments from other contributors. Special thanks go to Nancy and Rich Kinder and the Kinder Foundation, Laura and Tom Bacon, the Baxter Trust, the Hewlett Foundation, the Bill and Melinda French Gates Foundation, the William T. Grant Foundation, Chevron, JP Morgan Chase Foundation, Wells Fargo, Willie Nakayara and Associates, the Cullen Foundation, Raynette and Stan Merrick, the Spencer Foundation, PNC Bank, as we mentioned, Claire and Eric Anya, Arnold Ventures, Catherine and Hank Coleman, Sis and Hasty Johnson, Becky and Ralph O'Connor, Bank of America, Bracewell, HEB, and the United Way of Greater Houston. So let me now introduce our speaker today, Antoine Bryant. If you wouldn't mind, Antoine, turning on your video and your audio. There he is today. Antoine, thanks very much for wearing a tie. It's a very unusual thing in the world of Zoom, but we appreciate it. Antoine, as many of you know, is well known to many of you here in Houston as a thought leader and a community engagement expert. He lived in Houston for many years. He was executive director of the Row House Community Development Corporation and also a project manager for Moody Nolan, where he worked on affordable housing projects in Houston's historically African-American neighborhoods. Last summer, Antoine changed direction a bit and wound up accepting a job as the director of planning and development for the city of Detroit. And what I've advertised this, Antoine, is this is a kind of a tale of two cities. You know, what can Houston learn from Detroit, and what can Detroit learn from Houston? So, Antoine, I'm just going to turn it over to you. Again, for those of you in the audience, if you have a question, please put them in the Q&A box, not the chat box. We'll get to them at the end. Antoine, it's great to see you and have you here. We miss you here in Houston, although occasionally you are still here. We hear, but thanks for joining us today, and please feel free to go ahead now.
Bill, I greatly appreciate it. Thank you for the invitation. Thank you to the Kinder Institute for this opportunity to engage with so many family, friends, colleagues all across the greater Houston area and across the country. This is a bit of a homecoming, so to speak. I was involved and have done work with Kinder Institute for a number of years, so to have this opportunity to present is one I greatly appreciate and cherish. But here, we're going to welcome you everyone to Detroit. And this is something I got a lot. People are like, why Detroit? You know, I've been in Houston for 17 years, as many of you know, and really enjoy it. My family's still there. We're looking to everyone relocate shortly after the school year. But Detroit was a fascinating opportunity to lead not only the planning department, but really lead in casting a vision and manifesting that for this great American city. One of the guiding principles for the planning and development department is that this will be one city for all of us, right? So we're pursuing an urban redevelopment strategy unlike any that's implemented in America as it stands right now. This is a great opportunity right now for growth and inclusion. And so we have these three primary strategies that we're employing here in in Detroit. We're fostering more vibrant, growing neighborhoods all across the city. We're going to preserve all of regulated affordable housing units. So we're going to ensure that those units stay affordable, and we're going to ensure that wherever growth does occur, that it increases inclusion and reduces segregation in the city of Detroit. So part of those objectives, when we manifest them and use them with metrics, we're going to begin with 10 vibrant neighborhoods beyond downtown. We're going to preserve 10,000 units and create 2,000 more new affordable units. And I do want to put a pin in this. One of the things that was a part of my engagement when I was being approached for this position is I said Detroit has enough resources, has enough focus in its downtown core. If any of you have had the opportunity to visit Detroit, downtown Detroit is fine. It's actually coming back quite well. There's skyscrapers, there's activity, there's retail, commercial activity. I wanted to ensure that the neighborhoods outside of the downtown core are really able to grow, because Detroit, quite frankly, is a city of neighborhoods. As a result, a couple of years before I began, something called the Strategic Neighborhood Fund was created in 2017 with a round one of 3 primary neighborhoods represented here in yellow. And then because of the success that was exhibited in round one, it leveraged into round 2, where there was 7 more greater neighborhoods were selected, where there would be a capital raise, a planning efforts, and implementation in those areas to help bring Detroit back, as it were. What also I want to capture, which is highlighted here in the blue, are the primary commercial corridors throughout the city, but it also represents the capital that left the city and that was leaving the city all the time. What's represented here is the amount of dollars that are spent on an annual basis throughout this area, and over $1 billion could be captured if we were able to truly catalyze these commercial corridors that exist within the city. This is a collaborative effort. One of the things I think it's important is that, as many of you know, planning and development encompasses a wide swath of our society. It includes everything from physical development, economic development, our sewer and wastewater, all of our major infrastructure, our transportation. And so it's indicative here that all of these entities, both on the public side, as well as our dear friends with LISC and Invest Detroit, come together to make these things a true reality in the city. And so we want to talk about the future. We want to talk about the future of Detroit neighborhoods, right? And much of this is measured through the progress that we're going to show you throughout the city. You see that Mayor Duggan, he was able to make a $50 million commitment specifically towards affordable housing, announced during the height of the pandemic, right? So this is essentially last winter, they were able to secure this commitment, which was creating the Detroit Housing for the Future Fund. One of the very first developments that was up for design is in the middle of construction right now, is this affordable housing entity that you see on here on the right in one of our art districts. We're going to leverage some of the substantial architecture stock that exists in the city. There are literally phenomenal buildings all throughout the city, and every part of it. What you're seeing right here is arguably one of the largest in town, but it also represents a phenomenal opportunity. Ford just made a tremendous commitment of over $1 billion to renovate and recast what it was the main train station and office building that it was attached to it. And now it's going to be a co-working space, and they're going to redo the entire park in front of it. And it's going to be a tremendous opportunity and for the city of Detroit. And it's located right in the middle of Greater Corktown. Corktown is one of the oldest neighborhoods in the city of Detroit. It's approximately a mile right outside of the downtown core, and was the recipient of a Choice Neighborhood grant only 8 weeks ago. So we're really excited for everything that's happening in this particular neighborhood right here. And then we also approved, proposal N was approved by the voters in Detroit, which now allowed for $250 million in bonds to address blight. Unfortunately, one of the biggest things that people associate with the city of Detroit is neglect, is it's underserved, it's that there's vacant homes. And so now we have the resources and a vehicle to address exactly that. And we'll see some of that as we come along. The 10 neighborhoods that I just went through, the planning efforts and implementation are phased, as we can all imagine. However, the implementation is all occurring now. And we were able to continue it during the pandemic. So that's something that we've been able to push through, and we're continuing to push through even while we speak. The core of it, and this is something that was a very integral to much of my professional career in Houston, and it's something that I do feel very strongly about, is very effective and very consistent, early and often community engagement. Many of the efforts that we're doing, we're going to go to every neighborhood in the city of Detroit. There are over 209 neighborhoods. And one of my promises and commitments to the city is that our team will be at every neighborhood within the first 14 months. We've already well ahead of schedule. We're actively engaging these communities, either in planning efforts or traditional implementation projects. Some of them we're empowering them through grants, small grant projects for community gardens, implementation, and then some of them are the more traditional neighborhood framework plans. But community engagement is going to be key to how we really rebuild and continue to grow this city. Some of the ways that we're looking at streetscape development, development of more of our commercial corridors. We're actively designing and defining our park space and stabilization of our single family stock. And if you're seeing it through the variety of ways, we have something called the Detroit Economic Growth Council, which is the entity that really heads a lot of our economic development, both small business as well as engagement of larger entities. We're going to continue to add to our affordable housing stock. And then we have our programs of demolition and of refurbishing of existing homes so that residents of Detroit will be able to continue to have wealth building opportunities. This is the budget. Everybody's like, how does this work? Where's the money come from? Well, one of the things that was exciting and was one part of the pitch, which when I was coming to Detroit, was that there is the single-minded focus of the philanthropic center, the private sector, and resources available to the public sector. The city of Detroit received the 5th largest disbursement of American Recovery Act funds out of any city in the country, and definitely larger than would prescribe to its size, considering we're right now around the 26th or 27th largest city in the country by population. However, we've been able to leverage that public resources with philanthropic entities and with state money to be able to not only pump in $130 million in these two funds, but leverage it with equity and commercial debt to grow it to nearly $250 million in investment just in the last couple of years alone. How does that manifest in these neighborhoods? I'm gonna highlight two very quickly because I do want to pivot to the conversation. Bill and I had a fantastic conversation previously, and there are definitely some similarities and some things that we can grow from between Detroit and Houston. Ironically here, District 2, Livernois and McNichols, these are two commercial corridors and areas in town. Livernois is actually considered the oldest African-American led commercial district in this country. And is one that we're really excited about because of the resources that we're doing with the Strategic Neighborhood Fund. Over 22 African-American owned businesses have opened on this corridor in the last 18 months, right? We will have Caesar, they're represented here. Detroit Pizza Bar is gonna be opening up in December. We also have various entities that are everything from restaurants to art galleries to clothing stores, everything that you would need to have a vibrant commercial corridor. This is the planning framework study area that is right here. And you see we also have not only the corridors of Livernois and McNichol, but we're going to highlight the changes and what those effects can do. This is a streetscape of Livernois. This is what I first saw when I first came to visit Detroit in 2003. And I had the opportunity to go to Baker's Keyboard Lounge, which is a fixture in the city of Detroit, and has been pitched as one of the oldest continually running jazz clubs in the entire country. You see, you do have some street parking. You have two very fast moving traffic lanes on each way. And you do have some street trees, but you have a very small sidewalk and pedestrian way, which many of our Houston friends kind of be familiar with. So after the study, this is what you have right now. You have a tremendously expanded pedestrian way. You've got street trees. You have what you see in the charcoal gray is actually a shared bike lane and pedestrian lane, which is protected because you have the other additional sidewalk after that, and then you have a parking lane. This has been phenomenally well received, and as you can imagine, has changed the entire feel of this pedestrian way. This opened this spring in the middle of the pandemic. Another view of Livernois going south, and after we've changed it again, this is what, and it's really enlivened that area, both from a pedestrian experience as well as the improvements we were able to do in partnership with other entities to the businesses on the corridor. We have our bike racks for the rented bike programs, and we also have kiosks where people can get information. Additionally, on McNichols, which is essentially about 5 minutes around the corner, this is some before shots from before 2010, and now the after shots, where we've done the infrastructure improvement, and we're beginning to go in now with the improvements on the facades. These are where our new businesses are going to be located along this entire corridor. But we see even here what the change of, we have the two-way bike lane that's protected, as you can tell by the bollards. We have the parking lane right there. You have a mid-street resting place for when people are crossing the street, and then you have the traffic lanes. And so those very definitive street improvements are changing not only the way this experience feels, but how people navigate along that space. Additionally, this is our residents here that are going to be owners, the Detroit Pizza Bar is slated to open, like I said, in about 6 weeks. And so Marcus and Acuna are awesome. They're a great couple, and looking forward to having a bite when they open up. And then we also have some other affordable housing that's going in, that's transforming these areas. This is broke ground. They're going to continue construction. They're slated to open in the end of third quarter 2022. And then another things, we have a phenomenal riverfront called the Detroit Riverfront. Not many people know that literally from downtown Detroit, you can walk to our riverfront and you can see Canada. It's that close. And we wanted to ensure that that riverfront has access to residents from throughout the city of Detroit. And so there's a greenway that we have built called the Ella Fitzgerald Greenway. This was the very beginning of its phasing in 2017, 2018, and today. This is what it looks like. And so we have a way that goes from our riverfront all through many of our neighborhoods, connecting them to this fantastic amenity. This is it again through another part of town. And then the last part I want to show is some of our housing changes. Mayor Duggan has been successful in the 8 years. We've already knocked down over 20,000 single family units. And but there are also some that were available to be rebuilt, and we can rebuild and resell to residents in the area, continuing growth and generational wealth for these households and these families. Additionally, another neighborhood, same thing. This is Kercheval, one of the and Van Dyke, one of the primary cross streets on the Island View area of Detroit, which is just east of downtown, and it faces onto the water. And we, not only did we have the streetscape improvements, but we were able to work and get an affordable housing, mixed income housing that you see right here on the left-hand side. This entity, the Parker Duran, is the name of this apartment complex. It's over 120 units. And the way we have some very powerful regulatory rules in place, where if any entity receives public dollars, be they CDBG funds, home funds, what have you, there must be 20% of those units must be affordable. And so that's something that we're really excited about. And oftentimes, most of them are at 60% of AMI or below. Again, another view of the Parker Durand. We've redone the streets and the access ways. And we're totally re-enlivening and revisiting that entire neighborhood. Same thing with single family, and we're providing homes and making that available within our communities and transforming the neighborhoods from the blighted look that people associated with to something that people can continue to be proud and excited about again. And then the last thing, we want to look at playgrounds, right? There is a lot of green space, but I've often shared that you must program green space. It just cannot be just a patch of grass and some trees. So you have to be very intentional about your programmatic uses and make it multi-generational. So you have playscapes, you have walking paths, you have benches. You want to make sure that there's a variety of ways for people to enjoy these areas, which are within many of our communities. I'm going to leave with a couple of slides, and then we're going to go into our conversation. A couple of challenges that I came in with. We had an election a week ago, and in that election, our mayor won overwhelmingly with over 70% of the vote. But we have 6 new city council members of a council that only totals 9. So we're going to have a bit of a learning curve for many of our elected officials. Of that 6, only one of them has held elected office previously. He was a previous state representative. And so we have 5 very passionate, very excited citizens that are stepping to the plate to be new council members. But as a department head, we're going to ensure that they understand and we work together to manifest this vision for the city of Detroit. There had been some uncertainty around the pandemic. You know, how do we use open meetings? How does that work? Are we, has Zoom been successful? And it has been, and we're really excited that we've been able to maintain that through the end of the year. We're looking at if we're going to do that for Q1, but right now we're maintaining the Zoom for all of our public meetings. As I said, the city of Detroit received ARPA funding to the tune of over $450 million. But to ensure that we spend that accurately, we have to ensure all the protocols and procedures are in place. And so that's something that has been a work in progress, but we're continuing to ensure that those resources are appropriated specifically and to the best that they should be. And then part of the things that I'm excited about, we do have an older master plan. The master plan that currently exists for the city of Detroit dates to 2009. A private entity called Detroit Future City, which is a phenomenal organization, did another master plan, but that one does date from 2013. And for many of you that are in the planning space, we do know that a master plan usually has a life that's from 5 to 7 years. So we're actively pushing to look at doing a master plan for the city of Detroit, ideally beginning next year. And then the other challenge, the city of Detroit got a brand new planning director at the end of July. And so, what does that come with? My coming in at the end of July, I literally spent the first 2.5 months understanding the city, meeting with residents, getting to know where the synergies do exist and where the challenges are. And so literally have been running uphill, but very excited about it because we have had some successes. We've completed those neighborhood framework plans that we talked about with significant progress in all those areas. We received a very exclusive choice neighborhood plan in the neighborhood of Corktown, which is a real feat. We actually have processed hundreds upon hundreds of design review, historic district applications over this entire time, but absolutely no slowdown whatsoever. We have not missed a beat in that, even though most of my staff have been working from home for the entire time. We've received awards from the Michigan APA and Michigan ASLA for planning and implementation. And 2 other big things, we are in the very beginning stages of planning the new Joe Louis Greenway, which will be a loop throughout the city. That's going to 27.5 miles. It's going to go through 23 major neighborhoods and really serve as another avenue to link our city, but also to leverage possible economic and fiscal opportunities for our residents. All these things are going to be completed the end of this year and the beginning of next year. So we've got multifamily activity, we've got streetscapes, we've got parks, we've got commercial entities, and these are all coming within the next 9 months. So we have a lot of things, and it dovetails to what this is one city. It's for all of us. There were some challenges that I'd heard, and I heard from residents that they downtown only care about downtown. They downtown only care about the rich. They only care about New Center, which is right above our downtown area. They only care about Midtown. And so one of the things that I'm going to do, and I'm passionate about for all those that know me, is that this will be a city that represents everyone, that represents Detroiters, that represents longtime Detroiters that have been through some of the challenges of the last 20 years, but also helping it to grow and making it the great American city for everyone to come visit and also to call home. With that, I'd like to transition to Bill, and let's have a conversation.
Thank you, Anton. That was really great. We have a lot of wonderful questions from the viewers, but I wanted to start out by asking you, because you and I had a funny conversation about this. You arrive in Detroit last summer, and people say to you, "Well, you know, Antoine, Detroit is a really big city. You're going to have to get used to that, right?" And tell me a little bit about the conversations you had there.
That was the very first thing. It was fascinating. I first of all, I went through 3 rounds of interviews and then an interview with the mayor, and I was selected. I'm very excited about it. And the first thing I did, I was meeting with residents from all over the country, all over the city, but also many of our CEOs. And what was exciting about it, they all said, they were like, "Look, take your time. You know, we know you're drinking from a fire hose, but you know, Detroit's really big." And I'm like, "Well, you know, it's a big city. A lot of people, no. You got to drive. It's like, you know, it's 140 square miles. So it's going to be a thing." And I was like, "You know, you're right. Absolutely, certainly." And now, where were you at again before? Yeah, I just came from Houston. Houston big. I mean, if you consider 670 square miles big. Oh, well, I get, okay. Well, if you put it that way, I was like, yes, there's a bit of a difference. In Detroit, if people drive more than 20 minutes, they feel like they've gone way too far. And I shared with them, 20 minutes is Tuesday, right? So that's what it was when I was in Houston. So needless to say, I haven't put a whole lot of miles on my car, so I'm excited about that.
Nevertheless, Detroit is a city that was built for 2 million people that now has, what, 650,000. What kind of challenges does that create when you have basically that much vacant land or under, what do I want to say, neighborhoods that no longer are complete? They're kind of the opposite. They're incomplete communities, one might say.
Yeah, that's an interesting term, because that is accurate. That is one of the biggest challenges, right? When you have a city that literally in 1961 had 2.1 million people, and now at the close of 2020 had somewhere around 670,000, literally a third. It's about repopulation and rebuilding, right? One of the things that I've been very careful about when I talk to many of our residents, and I'm in the public though, is that this isn't a tabula rasa. This isn't a blank slate, right? There's this narrative that, because that mitigates and lessens the fact that there are residents that are here and have been here, right? So when we look at the biggest things, what I've been looking at and what's been successful so far is building upon the strength of the residents that are there. People that are here are ardent Detroiters, right? And so just like my dear friends and family in Houston will swear by all things Texas, Detroiters, many of you may have seen the Detroit versus everybody. Detroit, I mean, they're very passionate about this city, as they should. And so we're using the passion and excitement of the residents here, but then also there's probably quite a few people listening right now in Houston that are from Detroit. So many of my conversations have been what I like to call expats that are from Detroit, moved away for a variety of reasons, and I'm saying if we could get half of them back, that would make a tremendous difference just in helping to add to the city. And so I'm very careful to say that we're adding to the city. We're not rebuilding or replacing. And I think it's sometimes just the messaging can change and how people see themselves.
You mentioned about how, I'm going to go to the questions from the audience now. You mentioned about how there was concern that people only cared about downtown, and now you showed many examples of wonderful urban design changes in the neighborhoods. Are you concerned about gentrification, and what steps can you or are you taking in those neighborhoods to mitigate or avoid the impacts of gentrification?
It's a great question, Bill. And you know, as I like to call it, the big scary G word, right, is a reality in many of our urban cities. The fact remains that people are coming back to cities. You know, that's a national trend. People are coming back to Detroit because, quite frankly, there are jobs and it's cheaper than other big cities, right? So that makes it attractive. What we have to balance is that the city of Detroit also needs, quite frankly, you know, middle income households. You know, the city if we do a pure demographic slice, the household income in the city of Detroit is actually 30 to 40% less than the household income in the state of Michigan, right? We have probably the highest level of poverty in the state. We have a high level of unemployment. So there are some challenges that do exist that you know, would almost set the stage for gentrification. How we've been able to combat it, however, though, is we focus many of the efforts, what I showed you about housing, both for single family and for multifamily, are focused on preservation of existing housing stock, right? So if you live in a home that's affordable, it's going to stay affordable. But then additionally, ensuring that new housing is going to be amenable and attractive and attainable for current Detroit residents. Now, there are private stock that's going up, that's market rate. And it's market rate where, you know, a multifamily residence, one bedroom could be $1,200, $1,300, which is kind of market in Detroit, and sometimes go up to 2,000. Those things are happening. But one of the things that is good about the city, and amusingly enough and interestingly enough, one of the byproducts of having so much vacancy is that there's quite frankly enough room for us to be able to build and protect our residents and not have people being pushed out yet. So there's a real challenge that we have to keep our eyes locked on, but we're not at the place of some of our other cities like in Houston, quite frankly.
Another another popular question has to do with transit. The comment is it was very interesting. Oh, by the way, I want to say we have never seen the chat box blow up with friends saying, "Hey, it's great to see you," like we are right now. That's it. You are quite popular still in Houston. But the question about transit it was interesting to note that none of your slides showed any public transit. How do you envision the relationship between affordable housing and public transit? And I think maybe what you could address is public transit is quite deficient in Detroit, even compared to Houston.
Yep.
And how do you deal with that, particularly in such a spread out city?
No, thank you, Bill. First of all, you know, strong shout out to all the family and friends at Bikepad. Definitely always great to see you guys. Houston will always have a special place. And thank you for taking care of my wife and kids while they're still there. Thank you, guys. Additionally, the reason why there isn't as much transit in the presentation is because that's a gap. It's a real gap. That's something that Houston definitely has gotten better than Detroit has. Ironically enough, one of the synthesis of the two cities, Detroit's the motor city. Like, it's a thing. Like, people drive and people like to drive and people drive really fast all over the place, including streets. And as a result, even though there is a significant amount of our population that is transit dependent, oftentimes transit is seen as a second or third option because it's not nearly as extensive as it needs to be and has been under-resourced. Our transit director is actually relatively new. Ironically enough, he's been there. I arrived in mid-July. He got there in February, March, and came from Boston, of all places. And one of the things he and I talked about was trying to get more resources from the state for transportation. Right now, they're just under-resourced, quite frankly. But then also what we are in line is from a planning standpoint. We're working together to ensure that their routes coincide a lot with where our major capital investments are, so that we can get people, quite frankly, to the places where they're trying to get to. Last mile, first mile is a real challenge here. And so we're aligning their routes with the primary commercial and destination places. And we're working more on headways so that they can actually be a resource to our residents.
Okay. There's so many questions here. I'm not sure where to start, but Peter Bruton has a good question, which I wanted to bring up anyway. Sure. Basically, how does the public policy framework in Detroit differ from Houston? What policy levers do you see there that would help us, and alternatively, what aspects of Houston's policy framework do you see that would help to enable Detroit to thrive?
That's a great question, and that's something that Bill and I talked a bit. I've got both that are one example of each, and they're both dicey, but that's why it's fun. I came July 19th was my first day. I arrived here July 18th. Between June 25th and July 30th, Detroit had 3 floods. Now I'm willing to bet that no one on this call would associate flooding with the city of Detroit. After I preceded the first one. The second one came maybe 3 days after my tenure. I'm in a cabinet meeting with the mayor and about 12 or 15 other people, and I had to sit there and apologize. Say I did not bring the floods with me. It is not my fault. I don't know. It was trying to bring a bit of levity to our conversation, but what it did expose. And something that many of we have a whole sustainability czar, just like Houston, had been saying is that, okay, climate change is a thing. So we need to understand and appreciate that. And our infrastructure is old, right? So we've got this very old city with infrastructure that's aging, quite frankly, and had been neglected. And so when you have those three, we had a perfect storm where, pardon the pun, where essentially these were just thunderstorms. And our water department, she said, our lead engineer, she says our city is designed to absorb and withstand 3 inches of water per day. If we get 3 1/4, we're gonna flood, right? And both those times we got 5 inches over the course of one evening, and so it was those kinds of things. What it led to was, I was able to say we need to have a much more comprehensive approach to how we address this moving forward. Now, the planning department is working aggressively with our wastewater department for remediation plans. We're revisiting all the cost to redo the entire infrastructure plant under the city of Detroit, and being able to now put some metrics. We know, I warned them, look, this is going to be a 9-figure cost. It is not going to fit underneath the city budget, but these are things that I saw that I wasn't directly a part of in Houston, but I was very much privy to in many of the conversations that we had. So that's something we were able to learn and now implement here in Detroit. Now, one thing that on the other side that I think I found fascinating and is not in Houston, and I'll say yet, is that Detroit is the largest city that right now has a community benefits ordinance in place. In the city of Detroit, if you are a developer and you do any entity that's $75 million or above, a neighborhood advisory council and a CBO must be created, period, full stop. Like, it has to happen. And there are a series of meetings that must occur. There are benefits that must be agreed to and adhered to. And it's something that's been in place now for 18 months. I have my very first meeting. They have quarterly meetings with the developers and the community to talk about where they're measuring up. And I have my very first meeting in 2 weeks. And the developers they've done some really good things. They've done some things they have to catch up to. But it's exciting to see that this was something that was passed by the voters, and the developers have not shied from and have been active participants to make an equitable placement in this city. And so it's very exciting. Now, as a quick point, there was a request by some city residents to lower the threshold to 50 million. That did not pass council, but I'm not sure if that will come again later on in the next several months.
There's a bunch of questions about historic homes and so forth. One question which came in through the chat, remember to go through the Q&A, but one question came in through the chat from Tanya DeBose, who you have probably met at some point in your life. Asks, how is Detroit preserving its historic housing stock as affordable housing? How is history factored into the revitalization? And just along with that, there was a question in the Q&A, are the restored homes staying under the same ownership? Are they being sold? And what are you concerned about displacement? Excellent. So that's all kind of one big glob of questions there.
One big glob of questions, but it's all about housing and are we keeping people, right? So first off, we announced in October 1st that our partners, the planning department works hand in hand with the housing revitalization department, as you would imagine. And we've committed $30 million exclusively for the repair of roofs for seniors in our city. Right. So as you can imagine, and this is something in every city, I know I saw it in Houston, many of our homes and many of our neighborhoods are owned by seniors. They can't uptake them. They can't keep them up. They fall into disrepair, and oftentimes they lose those homes. Or if there's any other challenges in those houses, they're truly worsened because of roofs that are compromised. And so the team did an exhaustive survey of many of the residents about what kind of challenges that exist from a home stabilization standpoint, and overwhelmingly it was roofs. And so we've committed $30 million expressly for repair of homes that are owned by seniors and or low income to fix their roofs. We're going to do 1,000 roofs in the calendar year of 2022. We're also in the calendar year 23 looking to do another 500 homes of the repairs within homes that don't need roofs. So those are going to be 1,500 homes that will be repaired tremendously through a grant program that will help now stabilize those residents in their homes. Then additionally, I talked to you about the affordability, requirement for all of our multifamily. If you're doing multifamily in Detroit, you're going to do 20% of those units are going to be affordable. I mean, that's a period, right? To ensure that there's availability in every new development, right? So not everything is going to be just a market rate tower in downtown. Even the stuff downtown has a 20% quotient that they must hit, and many of them have gone a bit above that. So that part's exciting. Then thirdly, one of the things that we're looking to do is what's called a Rehab and Ready program, where, and this goes back to the question of if you're rehabbing it, is it going to be for residents or is it going to be for other people coming in? And these are Detroiters and Detroiters first, right? And so one of the things that the Mayor Duggan has been intentional, he campaigned on, and one of the things that really I found attractive was that they're very amenable and accountable to the residents that are here. And so that's something that we can stand behind. The last part of it, we talked about homes being demolished and what happens now, you have a vacant lot. So there's something called our side lot and our neighboring lot, which essentially, might be 2 lots down or might be a lot behind you program. If Mrs. Jenkins has a lot next door to her, we knocked down a house, she's been mowing it for the last 6 months or whatever, she essentially has first right of refusal to buy that lot. And typically we make the lots, $500, $1,000, what have you. And so that's a program that's been in place now for the better part of 1.5 years as well, almost 2 years. And we've sold probably 12,000 lots that way. Purely and explicitly to residents of the city of Detroit.
There is a question with the winnowing of people, or in some of these neighborhoods, there's a question about how this affects utility services. How do you provide utility service to these neighborhoods where there are only a few houses left, and how is the cost of providing services dealt with?
A great question. Ironically, so that's a good and a bad answer, right? So DTE is like the center point of Detroit, right? So it's the one that governs all of the power, provision of power in this area, and they have a huge monopoly. Now, they have been a great partner, but they've also been a great monopoly. And so we work with them to ensure that rates are at least amenable. Access has not been an issue. That has not been an issue, primarily because of what I described before. Much of the infrastructure is already present. And so we don't have issues with people losing power, losing gas, losing electricity. So that has not been an issue that's come to bear very often, even with the demolition of homes and the uprooting of many of our street infrastructure. That hasn't been much of a problem at all.
The next question is again about gentrification. I was wondering if there's anything else you wanted to say about steps that the city is taking to mitigate gentrification or make sure that the investment in older neighborhoods is going to the benefit of those who live there.
Great question. Well, first of all, I'm going to pitch a book, and I don't get any proceeds from it. I don't know this guy from a can of paint, but many people are familiar with The Color of Law by Richard Rothstein. But I also read a couple years ago How to Kill a City by P.E. Moskowitz. And it talks about the arc of gentrification, and he highlights 4 cities. And the cities he highlighted was New Orleans, Detroit, San Francisco, and then New York City, in that order. And interestingly enough, Detroit was kind of in the early phase of possible gentrification challenges because, 10, 12 years ago, when the city went through a bankruptcy, there were quote unquote working class and even working poor living in downtown Detroit, right? Because they had multifamily residents that lived there, residences and apartment buildings. Many of those had been transformed, quite frankly, into into market rate and loss and those kinds of things, and residents did get displaced. So that did happen. But as a result of a lot of those machinations, there's been much more of a doubling down to ensure that the neighborhoods are much more protected. And also a commitment that moving on, there has to be affordability built into our downtown core. Additionally, I'm a firm believer that, and this is a much longer conversation, gentrification is a layered conversation. I think it involves everything from housing accessibility to entrepreneurship and capital availability to access to quality schools and groceries. We've made a concerted effort to build Black businesses and build small businesses. So that's been one of the fastest growing pools of work opportunity has been entrepreneurship. So that's gone up tremendously. Additionally, the resources tied to mobility and our access to parks. We had a somewhat segmented city, but with some of the initiatives I described with our greenways, we are now making sure that our current residents have the same accessibility to valuable green space that those of higher means.
Next question, also a good one. Are Mdot, that's Michigan DOT, and the county and the transit agency effective partners in addressing the streetscape and bikeped mobility efforts? Detroit has many very wide arterials that may not be under the city's control. So are the other agencies playing a constructive role there?
Mdot is a strong partner. They come to the table, right? And so that's, in the past, there had been some tenuous relationships with Mdot and what it's called DDOT, which is our local entity. There had been some tenuous relationships with Mdot and just the city of Detroit in general. One of the dynamics, which again shows some of the analogies to the state of Texas, Detroit's a very blue city and a very pretty much red state, right? Then there's also a bit of challenge where, for better or for worse, Detroit's the largest city in Michigan. And so there definitely is some challenges by some of the member cities about how much focus and how much resources should go to the city of Detroit. And then I can't go down this entire presentation without noting the fact that the city of Detroit, even today, is 79% African-American and has been that for quite some time. And if you even talk to many of our elected officials and entities in Lansing, they'll tell you privately that has been a challenge too, where some people in power don't always think about that city with those people. And that's a real thing that we've had to address. But in the last several months, Mdot has been amenable. Mdot has been a good partner, and we are addressing streetscape development for many of these corridors.
Well, you kind of got into the next question, right? Which is about the state's relationship with Detroit, and which has historically been somewhat antagonistic. Do you find yourself needing to advocate for Detroit's control of its infrastructure? How do you mediate these conflicts, particularly if you're concerned with long-range planning?
So these, it's about relationship development and maintenance, right? That my team is actually in the midst of planning a visit for me in Lansing. So I'll be going there and doing a dance, right? I'll be going there and ensuring that, first introducing myself to many, but also, for lack of a better way to put it, presenting the case for Detroit and doing it as an opportunity, right? In many respects, as Detroit goes, Michigan goes. This is the economic driver for this state. And we want to show that Detroit is a great example of what can happen when we have a collaborative opportunity. And we have partners in the state that understand that. And we just want to be able to continue to craft that narrative so that everyone understands.
That's really interesting because that relationship has been very, very troubled over the years with a lot of mistrust on both sides.
Certainly.
Right? We don't know anything about mistrust. we don't know anything about that here in Houston and in Texas. can you give us an example of community engagement that actually brings the private sector and private capital to the table in the way you engage communities?
Certainly. So in a short term, what's interesting, and I do have to credit our mayor for this. When we first put together the SNF and the Strategic Neighborhood Fund program, the mayor essentially called up the CEOs of several of the major organizations in the city and said, I need a significant check from each of you to start to fund this program. That's what he said, right? And so, and now what's ironic, and this should come as no surprise, many of the CEOs, because they bought into the city, it became a competition thing, right? So if this bank come in, then this other bank says, well, I can't let PNC be the only one. Well, I've got to do it too. So as a result, that's how we've raised, quite frankly, that initial funding round was, putting the gauntlet out to our CEOs and then saying, well, I heard so-and-so's giving. I mean, what are you going to do? And like that, it really became that kind of a thing. We're putting together what you guys saw, quite frankly, as kind of a snapshot view of what the work that's been going on right now. We have an expanded one with a bit more metrics that we're preparing for a presentation at the end of January, where we're going, obviously, to go to our current funders. And then we also have a slew of others that have lined up. What I found fascinating, quite frankly, is that there's been a number of entities that have reached out to me that said, hey, we didn't fund the first round. We're excited you're here. What can we do? We want to be part of the next round. I had lunch with one of the a private entity that is prepared to write a 7-figure check. We had lunch yesterday. And she's like, let me know where I need to send this check and when I can sign up. So, and what's interesting.
Those are the kinds of lunches you like, right?
I love those lunches, but what's interesting is that many of them, what I've tried to steer them to is focus on your passion as opposed to focusing on a neighborhood, because, I might take your $5 million and use it throughout the city. So I'm not going to promise you we're going to use it for Banglatown. We're going to use it specifically for Warrendale. I might use it in Virginia Park. But we're going to use it principally to address the renovation and rebuilding of the community centers. And we're going to do 15 of them. And I know that you guys have a focus on child development. So it's really about recasting the ask. And I hearken back to some of my nonprofit lives where you have to create a good narrative to ensure that you are pitching to your funders appropriately.
There's a question about deconstruction versus demolition. Obviously, demolition has been a major issue in Detroit. You've had much of the city torn down. Are you considering different ways of dealing with it, salvaging materials, recycling the materials, and so forth?
Bill, you would ask me that on the eve of my historic designation commission meeting, which happens monthly. And that's one of our hot button topics, right? So
really?
Oh yeah, it is. And so in most cases, let me be abundantly clear. In most cases, we do try to look at what can be rebuilt. What is an asset is that there is a plethora of brick homes, because this is the Midwest and this is an old city. And so there's a lot of homes that there is an opportunity to salvage some of them. What becomes a challenge and when we have to mitigate is that because home values are depressed, oftentimes, I could repair a home and it might cost 30 grand to repair it, but the home might be valued at 40 grand, right? So, how do you make the cost outweigh demolition and rebuilding of a new home for someone? And so that's something that we have to, pay very close attention to. In most cases, we try to see if we can rebuild it, if it makes fiscal sense. But oftentimes there are challenges where, ironically, it's cheaper to demo and rebuild than it is to renovate and keep.
And so it's actually cheaper.
And sometimes it can be, yes.
Oh, wow. That's great.
Yeah.
Vincent Sanders says, greeting from Houston Metro.
Good to see you, Vince.
He says, thanks for showing the slide of 6 Mile in San Juan, where he grew up.
Yep.
And he's wondering about TOD projects in Detroit. You got to have T before you have TOD, I guess.
Yeah,
it's part of the answer.
Well, much of our TOD involves careful integration of vehicular transit as well as bus transit. right? So, you know, we actually have a very active TOD conversation occurring right now, right next to one of our major shopping districts, right adjoining one of our most consistent and stable neighborhoods. Oh gosh, Bezos, Amazon, yeah,
Jeff
Amazon
Bezos. Jeff Bezos.
is doing a tremendous, there's a distribution center and that whole deal, and it's right next to where our state fairgrounds are. And so one of the things that a design team had come up with through my predecessor was transforming the state fairgrounds and part of it into a TOD. That's something that's an active conversation right now. There has been a little pushback from our dear you know, Bezos and family, but we've tried to share with them that this can be a true value add to the community, where the development would drive even more activity there and be an asset to all the workers that are going to be going to that distribution center. So that's going to be a big one, but that's literally hot off the presses, and I'm in the midst of that right now.
Wow. You're in the middle of everything, aren't you?
Yeah, that's why I don't sleep very much.
As city, so the next question is schools are impacted by whether by population evolution. How do you make schools part of the planning process and create good outcomes for everyone, including students, which is something, as you know, that we deal with here at the Kinder Institute in thinking about K-12 education in relation to other community issues?
That's a great question, and it's something that I you know, many of the people know, many of I have two school-age children, right? And so I think about that intimately. I've got an 8th grader and a 4th grader. And it grieved me when I learned that the literacy rate in Detroit is one of the lowest in the country, right? So it's a real issue. One of the challenges also is that the city has a tenuous at best relationship with the public school
Which is that controlled separately, not by the mayor?
It's not by the mayor. That's absolutely true. It's controlled separately. And so that's something, and that's one of the result of the emergency management decree and guidelines that came out of the bankruptcy. And so for a number of years, the education system was state run, and by all accounts, public and private, it actually got worse. So now it's under more of a local authorship, if you will. But one of the things we've been looking at has been external patterns. There's a great initiative right now, a joint effort between Marygrove University, which was actually purchased by a system, and then University of Michigan, and they've made the Marygrove campus into a K-20 initiative. And so there's an early childhood center, there's an elementary school, there's a middle school and they're doing the add-a-year model, and then they're training young people. Ideally, they'll have an opportunity to apply and go right into University of Michigan, which is obviously a top tier institution. Additionally, the University of Michigan is having their students, their teaching college is going to be on this campus. So it's a really innovative model that's very much in the very beginning stages. There's only have 3 grades. There's the early childhood, there's 3 grades of the elementary already, and then 1 of the middle already in place. But it's a great initiative to try to address some of the school gaps. That's going to be an evolving one, and that's one that I'm still trying to figure out because I don't have as much authority, but I'm trying to find ways to influence which ways it goes.
It's kind of amazing that you've been there since July, and just absolutely every question on absolutely every issue that we've asked you about, you actually had an answer. And then you told the story about how you basically stepped off a plane. You'd never lived there. You'd stepped off a plane on a Sunday and you went to work as planning director of the city on a Monday. You and I are probably 2 of the only few people in the country who can say that we've had that experience. I literally did the same thing in San Diego. I flew across the country on a Sunday and I went to work Monday. How in the world do you ramp up on everything all at once? So, other than not sleeping?
So one thing, and I will give a tremendous shout out. My phenomenal wife, we talked about this entire process because it was going to be a shift, and a pretty abrupt one and a pretty significant one. And, my moving at the end of July was not going, obviously, to provide enough time to vet schools, much less two of them, much less trying to find neighborhoods to live, buy a house, sell a house in Houston. And so she offered, she's like, look, go ahead, go out there, you're going to be a bunch of meetings anyway, and, we'll come after the school year. And it made a tremendous difference.
Oh, that gave you more time to be able to.
Gave me more time, right? So literally, I'm only half joking when I say most evenings, I'm at a community meeting, I'm meeting with a council member, I'm doing these kinds of things because that's what I'm supposed to be doing. My wife is doing a phenomenal job managing an 8th grader and a 4th grader. And for all those that know my kids, they're active kids. She's doing that while being a corporate exec herself. And so, that's what, quite frankly, allows me the bandwidth to do all that I do.
Yeah, wow.
And copious amounts of Mountain Dew. So,
well, shout out to her then.
Waddy Bryant in the building. It's Waddy Bryant.
And Mountain Dew has more sugar than any other soft drink, right? That's probably
absolutely.
Here's a question from someone else you probably ran into from time to time in Houston, Jeffrey Lowe, who says, what do you believe is Detroit's greatest asset on which to build upon for advanced planning? And then the second question, which I think is a good one, you touched on this before, but is there a lesson for Houston that you might glean from your few months in Detroit?
So greatest asset, it's always good to see Dr. Lowe, dear friend and a tremendous colleague and a fixture and great for the city of Houston. So it's always great to hear from him. The greatest asset, and it's not a cliche, but it really is. Well, there's two. I will offer two. You have a phenomenal footprint, right? So this is a city that still has the infrastructure to hold 2 million people, right? So whereas many other cities like a Houston, where they're bursting at the seams and we're annexing and we're growing and continuing to grow, we have streets and land, right, where people can, we can add to and bring people back. So, we also have a tremendous architectural stock. There are phenomenal buildings that do exist. And some of them date 100, 150 years, but they can be repurposed or revisioned. So there's a real opportunity there. But then the other thing is you have easily some of the most passionate people in this nation, right? I used to joke when I was in Houston, and many of my friends here know me. When I was there, I was from Brooklyn. I loved Houston. Houston was phenomenal for my family. But I was the Brooklyn guy that lived in Houston. And Brooklyn people are obnoxious, and there are Brooklyn people all over the country. Well, Detroiters might be one of the very few that could rival for their allegiance to their city. Detroiters love this city. And when you have a residents that love the city through thick and thin, and there's been a whole lot of thin, it gives you a great foundation to be able to pivot from. And so it's been really, really strong that way. As far as things that can be shared in the city of Houston, I think to continue, and there's been some steps in this direction, but I think a continue and a growing focus on infrastructure development. Every time it rains, my people get nervous, right? Because we don't know what that's going to mean. And so we have to be very concerted in continuing on that. I think the continued, there's some great engagement that's happening in Houston. Obviously, big shouts to my dear friend Tanya DeBose and some others that have been, incredibly active in ensuring that the voices of Houstonians are heard. I think there's opportunity to even grow that. And, this CBO that the city of Detroit passed, I think could serve as a real template, right? To ensure that there is at least some equitable conversations about how cities grow. One of the things that I think is a misnomer sometimes is that the relationships that are established through a CBO or CBA process have to be antagonistic. And I think there's a lot of room to show where they can be not only advantageous for both parties, but also can lead to a real opportunity to develop a full and complete city.
We only got about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to skip through a couple of the questions to get to some that I think are interesting. One person asks, and this is, of course, relevant to the Houston situation, what are your initial thoughts on in Detroit, the major I-375 reconstruction project that promises to reconnect a historically disenfranchised area to Corktown and the Riverfront and the CBD? Now, of course, we have no freeway controversies here in Houston. So this is completely irrelevant to us, but maybe you can talk a little bit about that project to the extent that you know about it,
Yeah.
and what lessons that may have.
Houston has all highway infrastructure and conversations sewn up, and has done it very, very well, I'm sure. But the 375 has been a hot button issue for over a decade. It's a art, which is the narrative will sound familiar. It's a arterial at the edge of downtown that currently goes into a major feeder highway, and then is literally, as it stands right now, kind of as it cuts through two neighborhoods. It cuts through essentially what was Black Bottom, one of the original Black neighborhoods in the city of Detroit. The discussions on the books originally had talked about really making a huge, cut through the neighborhood in a much larger infrastructure discussion, but it's been on hold. And what's good about the fact that it's been on hold is that it has allowed for a much more engaged conversation, not primarily by the residents that are going to be affected, but also by departments like my own and by downtown. And so we've had some very constructive conversations with Mdot. We're leaning much more to a more amenable solution that I think will surprise people across this country. But one thing the primary thing that's helped us, quite frankly, has been that the resources were not available for it to be implemented. Now, what's ironic is that the infrastructure bill that just got passed has now allowed for, the premise that we'll have those dollars sooner and in a much larger abundance. So, quite frankly, and I can share this with everyone here, I now have 3 meetings with Mdot on my calendar that were not there 2 weeks ago. So, the 375 installation is now a front burner conversation, but I'm excited that the planning department, in conjunction with our mayor's office, is going to play a much more integral role than we were previously.
Okay. Probably the last question from Kim Mickelson.
Kim, hey.
Shout out. Another shout out. She points out that Michigan's tax structure is the opposite of Texas. That there's a state income tax and there's less pressure on property taxes. And in fact, that was a reform for schools and local stuff. In fact, that was a major shift in Michigan, shifting schools to state funding and less on property tax. Do you think that is a system that would help manage gentrification, people not being taxed out of their homes, and because there's heavy reliance on the property tax, as there is in Texas?
So the short answer there, Kim, and always good to see you, is yes. The short answer is yes. It could be a vehicle that we could use to mitigate that. The challenge, however, is that, and this is something that Mayor Duggan had been addressing previously and still is in the midst of, residents had been overtaxed for so many years that now we're literally in a place where some residents have started to fight for refunds, right? And also revisiting of what their valuation was. So the economy, when it tanked nationally in 07, 08, it hit cities like Detroit even worse. And so you combine an overall national dip in the economy with a declining housing stock and housing valuation, and then shortly thereafter, an eventual bankruptcy filing by the largest city in the country. That's how you received, and you lived in a home that was worth $10,000 and $15,000. Now the challenge is that people were living in homes valued at $15,000, and they still had $3,000 and $4,000 in taxes, and some of them even more than that. And so many of our residents went through several years where they were taxed at 3 and 4 and 5 times what they should have been. That became incredibly prohibitive, and which led to many residents obviously becoming behind on their tax.
Right.
So what we're seeing right now, where the tax rates have gone down, many residents are still dealing with the fact that some of them are still in arrears from several years back.
Wow.
So, the short answer to your question, Kim, is that it's a great vehicle that we're looking to expand more of, but we still have challenges from the past that we still have to address.
Yeah. All right. Well, we're just about out of time. Anton Bryant, thanks very much for being with us today. It's been a pleasure to have you back in Houston, at least virtually, and have you and good luck in Detroit. We wish you well, and we hope you make a big difference there. We know you will.
Yep.
Next Tuesday, November 16th, the Kinder Institute will share highlights from a forthcoming report on affordable housing preservation in Harris County, a report that was sponsored by JP Morgan Chase. We will host a panel discussion on how Houston can preserve affordable housing amid rising land values and demand. So please come on board and watch that. And then our next Kinder Institute Forum, December 1st, will feature parking guru Donald Shoup, my former professor at UCLA, who will talk about potential parking reforms that make cities more sustainable and equitable. You can register for these upcoming events by visiting kinder.rice.edu. So again, we had a wonderful crowd today. Everyone in the chat is giving Antoine kudos for the presentation. You're easily the most popular, the most interactively popular speaker we've had in a long time. Antoine, thanks a lot. It's great to see you, and hope to see you back in Houston maybe one of these weekends.
I look forward to it, Bill. I put my contact information out there if people want to reach out, but thank you guys so much.
All right, great. Thank you, everybody.